So Sui's Garden of Grotesqueries has been out for a few weeks now, and I promised you fine people an integrated strategies event coverage. Unfortunately, I forgot that Christmas was right around the corner, so delays were inevitable. And through some form of mad science, my blood system was somehow replaced with an alcohol system. And now that I have consumed enough alcohol to put Palace to shame, it's time for another round of slop. And so I ask you, do you love seaborn? Do you enjoy consuming those that come from the deep? Do you enjoy not being turned into food by the seaborn? Regardless, you, yes, you specifically, are joining the many, one way or another. Please, do not resist. Or do. It won't matter in the end. Continuing down the path of covering stories of the old integrated strategies game modes has led us to the next logical choice, the one after Phantoms, and this one is probably the most divisive one. From other people I've talked to, opinions in IS3 seem to vary wildly between love it or hate it. You want my opinion? This is a recording, so I can't hear you, so you're getting it anyway. Just pick the starting squad that lets you have a E2 Texas altar and then steamroll the early floors. Does that strategy fall off in the highest difficulty settings? Probably, but how am I supposed to know? I just got my trimmed metal and stopped setting higher difficulties after that. There are 4 primary factions involved in Integrated Strategies 3. Really, it's only 3 that matter, but one gets a pass cause I like them. Most of which require only the briefest of explanations. The Iberian Inquisition, the Abyssal Hunters, the Church of the Deep, and the Seaborn. I am not going to sugarcoat this, you don't really need to know much about any of them. So, for all but the Seaborn, we're going to speedrun this. The Iberian Inquisition is, as the name would imply, the Inquisition that calls Iberia their home. Shocking, I know. Primarily, they serve as protectors of the innocent, defending them from sin, both real and imagined. Unfortunately, in Integrated Strategies 3, that role is replaced with trying desperately to prevent the never-ending tide of Seaborn from obliterating everything. Spoiler alert, that does not end well for anyone. I'm going to be real, for the most part, they exist in very interesting background lore, but I think they're cool, so I wanted to give them a section here. Yes, this is an excuse to show off Irene. The Abyssal Hunters are the super soldiers of Aegir. Having once existed in enough numbers to slay a god, now they are only a fraction of their former selves. Not to mention that one of their few remaining members has something of a god complex. No, they don't believe themselves to be better than everyone around them. They are infected by a seaborn leviathan and will, without fail, fall to that power during this event. So, Scotty will ensure the few remaining Abyssal Hunters will become the last Abyssal Hunters. Except for Andriana, being forgotten by Hippogriff might actually keep her alive in this timeline. The Church of the Deep are the local Iberian cult who seek to spread the religion of the Seaborn, inviting you to become one of the many. As such a thing would suggest, nobody likes them, not even the Seaborn. They are, after all, still just matter to be assimilated. Little known fact, but niche micro-e-celebrity plus minus is a member of this group. Finally, the Seaborn, the all-consuming hive mind calling the oceans of Terra their home. This event is what told us most of what we know about the Seaborn. The Abyssal Hunter events might have told us a lot, but IS3 revealed so many insane things about the Water Tyranids. The never-ending march of the Nethersea brand continues unabated. The Seaborn began as a project started by the predecessors. The original purpose of the project was to create the environment for life to exist. This was towards the twilight years of the predecessor's reign, so the project never reached its full scope. The project experimented on Faronmets that lived within the sea, and used their bodies as the nests to create this new life. These Faronmets would become the Leviathans, or Firstborn we know and love today. We know that there are at least 4 of these Firstborns to exist. Caerula Arbor or Izumik, Primordial Lifespring, Never Melting Glacier, and Ishamala. We are more familiar with some of these than we are others. Primarily, Ishamalar is the main firstborn we gotta worry about, as it is the origin point for the modern Seaborn. It was one of their offspring that caused the very first Seaborn to come into existence. Although, you can blame Aegir for getting that whole process started. Around 200 years ago, Mortis, one of Aegir's great explorers, discovered the facility that housed the Great Leviathan. Ishamalar shared with them the destruction of the predecessors, which caused Mortis to go a little bit crazy, realizing that destruction lies within the future of his people as well. As such, he consumed one of Ishamalar's offspring and transformed into the first Seaborn. Upon unleashing the trapped god, the Seaborn crisis would begin, and in the centuries since, the Seaborn have marched down the path of survival and the path of destruction for all those else on Terra. Now, you might be able to tell that I have a favored faction here from these four, and yes, it is of course the Inquisition. All my homies love killing innocent civilians to preserve peace. So what brings us to the Caerula Arbor? Aside from the standard Abyssal Hunter stuff, we find ourselves in Iberia following a joint operation to understand the Seaborn, launched by Rhodes Island, the Abyssal Hunters, and the Inquisition. Alongside the Doctor, Rhodes Island operator Tulip and Mizuki have travelled to Iberia to carry out works in regards to the study. As you can tell by the title of this event, Mizuki is going to be a central figure. This is due to him being an Aegir Seaborn hybrid. Hearing the call of the sea, Mizuki volunteered to accompany the Doctor on their journey through Iberia. Along the way, he remembers Cicero, an old man who adopted him out of the kindness of his heart, and certainly not because he was grooming him as a member of the Church of the Deep. Despite that, Mizuki values the lessons Cicero taught him, especially the one on how to become a better human. Regardless, after arriving at the home of Cicero and finding it empty, Mizuki heads for the sea in the hopes of finding him alongside the Doctor. While those two are looking after that side of things, the Church of the Deep plots the events of Sultifera Navis in Grand Pharaoh. Scotty and Gladia and Spectre will have to deal with this plotline, however, in the background, as the Doctor is otherwise engaged. Should they fail, the consequences mean nothing less than destruction of Terra as we know it. Ominous warnings aside, on their journey, the Doctor and Mizuki can stumble across many different endings. Not all of them are canon. However, unlike in Phantom and Crimson Solitaire, it's not a squint and you can make it somewhat fit type of non-canon. If you are at all familiar with the lore behind IS3, you will know that I left out a very important piece of it in earlier discussions. The Last City. Now, I know we haven't talked about any endings yet, but I'm still gonna spill the beans here. The Last City is a final bastion against the Seaborn erected with the technology left behind by the predecessors. Not much is really told to us about the Last City proper, other than that Calcet required the aid of the Ferenmut and the Beast Lords to build it. It is successful at holding back the Seaborn, but should a god turn its full attention upon the city, it is only a matter of time till it succumbs to the Horde. Just leave any medical professionals that would attract the love and affections of a white woman outside the city, and you'll probably be fine. At least, for the time being. With all that said though, we should probably start talking about our different endings. Also, the IS3 Sarkaz is hot. That should go without saying though. We'll start off our journey with the most obvious choice, the canon ending. Also, our first ending. Precious Days. Mizuki's journey through Iberia and into the ocean leads him to a grove where he encounters Cicero and Highmore. Highmore is an Iberian islander who yearns to become a member of the Mani and urges Cicero to provide her with the Seaborn flesh so that she may ascend. Despite how I described him, Cicero is hesitant to provide the goods, but relents in the end. Highmore is however not built for the assimilation lifestyle, and her mind is overwhelmed by the Mani. The regret over her actions leads her to transform into a Seaborn, and Mizuki is forced to take her down. Upon defeating her, Highmore reverts to her human form and falls unconscious. Cicero reveals himself to Mizuki at this point and discusses the difference between her and Mizuki. Mizuki, who partook of the Seaborn flesh, yet retained their humanity. Highmore, however, rejected her humanity, and when exposed to the Mani, rejected them as well. As such, in Cicero's eyes, Mizuki is the ideal human. Mizuki finds the whole notion ludicrous, and as such rejects the very premise of his argument. With the two parting ways after, Mizuki decides to spare Highmore's life. After regaining consciousness, Mizuki cooked what was left of her Seaborn self for Highmore to eat. So, not even low-key, Mizuki fed Highmore to herself. Haimura is of course devastated by her rejection by the Mani, but Mizuki promises to look after her, so all's well that ends well. Except the mad cultist Mizuki just allowed to walk away, but I am sure he has learned the error of his ways. I mean, thank God Mizuki was there, cause in an alternate timeline, Haimura just loses her mind and Cicero abandons her to die a slow and painful death. While that was going down, Ulpanius was busy being Ulpanius, and infiltrated Cicero's lab and found quite a bit of useful files there. Specifically, notable names of people within the Academies of Technology and Science within Aegir. As such, he learns of the Church of the Deep's influence within Aegir and their desire to ensure Skadi becomes Ishamala. As such, Ulpanius intends to prevent the Abyss Hunters from returning home. So if you're wondering what he was up to while Skadi and friends were on that boat, worry no longer. So you know what Ulpanius did with that information and how he prevented disaster from befalling Terra. But what if that didn't happen? Well, in the Age of Silence ending, we get a peek at that possible fate. Mostly, you can assume the lead up is the same, but instead of reaching Haimura, Mizuki encounters the Last Knight, a knight from Casimiras who has become a Seaborn after being exposed to the creatures for long enough. Regardless, for a time the knight accompanies Mizuki and aids him in his quest, believing that they both want to slay the ocean. At some point, a storm will batter the pair, and the Last Knight will vanquish it, with or without the aid of Mizuki, although he will be weakened considerably should he battle it alone. Eventually, the knight mistakes Mizuki for the root of the calamity befalling the land, abandoning Mizuki and facing off against him in battle. Although formidable, Mizuki manages to survive the night long enough for him to come back to his senses. Recognizing a far greater threat has appeared, the Last Knight rides out against the god of the sea, a reborn Ishamala. A second profound silence befalls Terra. Although the Last Knight hesitates for a moment against the might of the Mani, he nonetheless advances, and against the horde that would consume Terra, buys them just a few more moments. His charge is futile, but he would give Terra all the time he could. Soon, all of Terra will fall beneath the waves and succumb to the will of the Mani. Mizuki, for his part, protects the Doctor from Ishamala, although it costs him his life, and he is devoured by the Horde. In the aftermath of a reborn Ishamala, all of Terra unites against their common enemy. However, a tsunami devastated the land, and all who opposed the Seaborn met their end. The Abyssal Hunters are annihilated by the sea, with Gladia, Spectre, and Ulpanius becoming statues in the depths. The Inquisition too is wiped out, with Inquisitors like Irene and Jordi being some of the final survivors protecting the people of the land. At this point, you should assume that most, if not all, of your favorite operators meet their end. The Knights of Casimiras, whom I always glaze, survived for just one day. Latania too only lasts a single day against the onslaught of the sea. Even the witchcraft of Sami and the technology of Columbia crumble before the evolution of the Mani. Finally, all the remaining Emperor's blades unleash the demonic power within them to create a barrier of collapsals, but the demons are too overwhelmed by the Mani. In the end, the final Tianchi of Yan sacrifices himself to buy time for the remaining humans to flee. It is here where all their efforts are rewarded by Calcet. While they fought for every minute, Calcet used the power of the Fairmont and Beast Lords to construct the last city using predecessor technology. However, even with all the effort it took to build the city and the lives lost ensuring it be humanity's home, many were abandoned when the city was forced to close its gates before the Seaborn could gain access. From here, only two fates await the city: total destruction or salvation in the form of a mass Seaborn exodus. We'll cover that mass exodus soon, but for now, ending 3, Price of Peace. Well, we've seen the total annihilation of all life on Terra. Well, all non-Seaborn life anyway. So what if humanity locked in and overcame the Seaborn? Well, Mizuki locked in and overcame the Seaborn. Humanity is just along for the ride. Regardless of whether he meets Haimura or the Last Knight, Ishamala is reborn and begins wiping out humanity. Mizuki heads deep into the ocean. Using the information found within Cicero's notes, Mizuki and the Doctor discover a predecessor laboratory. Within, they find the remains of the Leviathan, Caerula Arbor. Noticing Mizuki's presence, Caerula Arbor bestows its remaining might upon him and tasks him with overthrowing Ishamala. Continuing on their journey, Mizuki and the Doctor discover what remains of the Abyss Hunters. all but Scotty have perished in the Church of the Deep's plot to awaken Ishamalar. And with all of humanity's hopes lying on his shoulders, Mizuki does battle with the Seaborn God. With the power bestowed upon them by Caerula Arbor, Mizuki defeats Ishamalar. Despite overcoming the Seaborn God, the Church of the Deep has activated another Leviathan, the primordial lifespring, to bring about a disaster to drown the world. In order to stop it, Mizuki willingly assimilates into the many to pacify the calamity, saying one last goodbye to the Doctor before fading away. The Seaborn are completely pacified, but at the cost of one of Rhodes Island's operators. With the situation not escalating to the point that the last city was needed, much of the devastation of the second ending doesn't occur. As such, after the end of the Seaborn menace, Terra returns to its pre-disaster state, with all the nations of the world simply returning to the pre-devastation status quo. Aijo even continues their isolation out of pride due to not needing the rest of Terra. Nevertheless, Rhodes Island continues its goal of ridding the land of the suffering wrought by Originium. However, every year, the Doctor makes a pilgrimage to the shores of Iberia, spending a whole day talking to the waves, hoping that one day their words will reach Mizuki. Although no response comes from the man, the ocean always remembers the Doctor. Ishamalar survives this timeline, by the way. During their battle with Mizuki, they were separated from the Mani. Weakened greatly by the ordeal, Ishamalar releases Scotty from their control. As an outcast of both humanity and the Mani, the Abyssal Hunter laments her fate. Unable to find acceptance in the sea, and refusing to return to the Doctor's side due to her guilt, she hides herself away underwater. Unfortunately, no one will ever hear her song again. So yeah, even when humanity wins, you shall experience pain and suffering. Unless you hate Scotty, in which case you are probably happy. Although I must say that adding this to her character does make her a lot more interesting. Shame we won't see it in canon. On that cheery note, let's hop into the final ending of IS3, Stella Caerula. Branching off from the third ending, instead of finding Cicero's notes, Mizuki and the Doctor find a map that leads them to a relic from the predecessors that leads them to the remains of the Caerula Harbor. Upon discovering this, Mizuki thinks of an idea to resolve the crisis. What if he became one of the firstborn? By assimilating the remains of Caerula Arbor, he could use its power to figure out an alternative solution to the Seaborn. The Doctor goes along with this, cause humanity is quickly losing ground against the Seaborn. Upon reaching the location where the Arbor is being experimented on, Mizuki starts his ascension. The Doctor can either choose to interrupt the process to protect Mizuki, or allow the process to play out so that the Arbor can lend some of his power to Mizuki. As the ascension reaches completion, Mizuki's individuality is tested. Mizuki may choose to complete his goal, bide his time, or choose to challenge the Mani. All that is decided by IS3's lights mechanic, so I won't worry about the specifics. We only have to worry about putting Mizuki down like the dog he is. Reborn as Izumik the Firstborn, he provides one final test for the Doctor. Passing the test, Mizuki's dream of a Terra free from the threat of the Seaborn is fulfilled. Satisfied with how everything resolved itself, Izumik separated itself from Mizuki, giving the man a body the same as his previous one. Thanking Mizuki for instilling in them the lessons of humanity, Izumik called upon all the Seaborn to join him in finding a new home for the Seaborn. And so, the Seaborn leave Terra behind to find a new home among the stars, presumably evolving into bug monsters along the way and ending up in the Milky Way galaxy to cleanse it of biomass. Warhammer references aside, this process took a few years. And before leaving, the Seaborn terraformed all of Terra, in the process ridding the land of Originium, so rock cancer is no longer a thing. At least for the new generation. Shame that all of Terra's technology run on this stuff, cause it's gone now. I am sure society will survive the transition thanks to Aijo's technology though. The humans emerging from the last city embrace their newfound homeland however, with a Liberi woman represented by Fiametta here finding Mizuki in the wild. It should be noted that Mizuki doesn't recognize the language she speaks, so a long time has passed. However, Mizuki spots a Rhodes Island badge upon her chest, and so heads for the last city. The last city is now the center of Terran civilization. During the crisis, the old powers dismantled themselves to ensure the survival of their civilization. As such, the old nobility and kings no longer exist, and Rhodes Island is the spiritual leader of this new society. Mizuki arrives at the expanded city and meets with the last survivor of Rhodes Island, Calcet. She informs Mizuki that through their sacrifice and the Doctor's plan for the future, civilization survived the extinction level event. The Doctor now rests within the sarcophagus, only being awakened when most needed. Despite the power of the sarcophagus, the Doctor nears the end of their life, having spent much of the time since the Great Catastrophe outside the sarcophagus. Regardless, Calcet welcomes Mizuki back into Rhodes Island, and he becomes a cornerstone in the rebuilding works. Many years later, one of the few Seaborn remaining on Terra encounters one of the descendants of the survivors. With the woman offering them food, the many realize that humanity can now coexist with the Seaborn. And that, my friends, is Mizuki and Caerula Arbor. It's pretty interesting, especially with them giving us a look at what a Seaborn apocalypse would look like. Unsurprisingly, it does not end well for humanity. The complete and utter devastation of the human race aside, knowing the Seaborn could wipe out every threat on Terra does up the stakes quite a bit, at least for the Seaborn, although it might diminish the threat of the demons and the priestess. In fairness though, it only involves most of humanity dying in the best case scenario, so really it doesn't affect those other world-ending threats that much. This event truly shone a light on the Seaborn in a way that IS4 really didn't for the Collapsals. Yes, the demons were portrayed as this existential threat that truly hadn't turned their intentions to the world, but still, two Sorkas, a snow priest and a scientist, overcame a demonic incursion without much casualties. Yes, the Sami warriors were decimated, but that doesn't compare to the complete and utter societal collapse that took place during the Seaborn incursions. Yes, the Seaborn are more of a quick death once they get things going, as opposed to the Collapsal's slow but damn near irreversible advance, but getting hit with the Nah I'd Adapt can't feel great for the demons. Aside from that, IS3 doesn't really live up to the hype moments and aura that is IS5. Like, say what you will about the cool fish monsters, but Amiya saying Terra has lost existence privileges is a little more interesting. Regardless, I think IS3 is pretty cool. Although, you were probably too busy playing IS6 to go back and give it any real attention. And, for the record, IS6 will be covered in its entirety when all the endings are added, simply because I like having complete events to cover. This here video was meant to be the last video of 2025. But here we stand when it is the first of 2026. Well, I have plenty more ideas for 2026 videos that will hopefully not take too long to complete, so I won't wax poetically for too long here. Shout out to the wonderful members of the factory. You are the innocent Terran civilians to my unending monsters of the deep. Y'all, be good people, and I will see you in the next one. I do not care for Zumia. All I got is that bum-ass marketing material push. You need to get better ships.